This is the secretly most asked question by male applicants when pursuing a home loan with their partner, whether it be their wife or their husband, is that before I buy this property, and since the money is coming from their pocket, should I get a prenup or buy the property under a trust? In this video, we explore two of the options: buying a property with a prenup but under their personal name, or buying a property with no prenup but under a trust which protects the asset against their spouse. That's if, they get divorced. Now, before I go to my drawing board, which is basically a notebook, but it sounds pretty cool, drawing board, I've divided two columns, prenup and trust, and before I list down the pros and cons on each, let's go to the prime motivation, the driver behind why they ask this question, usually 90% for male applicants, but we do get female applicants sometimes, is why are they so afraid that their spouse will take half their shit? Well, usually this is the typical scenario, right? So we have a partner, couple, whatever it is, they're on good income, right? They want to buy a property up to $1.5 million. Call it their owner-occupied property or their investment property, right? They have zero savings, right? Just to start off with, good life, good lifestyle, saved shit, right? What happened is the male applicant has the cash. The father, mother has the 20% plus stamp duty, which works out to be 20% plus stamp duty, $375K. And the underlying fact is the female or the other partner didn't come up with a deposit, right, to purchase this asset. So for example, if they purchase a property without a prenup or without a trust or in their personal names, and they've been living with each other for maybe more than 2 years, which solidifies the relationship under the family law court, the other partner didn't contribute the any part of the money, well, they can have dips into 50% of that asset. And what happens here is the parent of the male applicant, for example, will be crying, old mate boomer will be crying, will be like, hey, we just poured $375,000 down the bloody drain. Therefore, what I've seen is when this situation arises, and obviously if the male applicant has divorced too, will bring to the other partner or the wife and go, hey, I want you to sign a freaking prenup. And prenups are actually recognized as legally binding documents under the Family Law Act 1975. Because without a prenup, the asset may be considered joint property subject to division upon divorce. However, explicitly outline these assets, for example, this over here, when we split, you can have half the asset minus this amount because this belonged to my father or my mother. Or maybe in the prenup, when we divorce, you get jack crap, I keep the whole thing. And what happens is it separates property within a prenup, and then both of these parties have to sign and agree before obviously buying the property. Obviously, couples going down the prenup arrangement before buying a property or even getting into a marriage is pretty awkward and kind of like unromantic. So that's when you need to consider maybe buying a property under a trust. And therefore, some couples will consider buying a property under a trust. What it means in a nutshell is there's a separate entity that is created by the account, obviously a shell company, a shell trust that owns the property, okay? The ownership doesn't belong to the couple, but the third party entity. But then you gotta beg the question, does a trust really protect assets from a divorce? Well, under the Family Law Act, a trust could be considered property and thus liable to be divided between the parties to a divorce. Therefore, you need to get a specific trust if you want to protect your property against your bloody spouse. The other option is to establish a bloodline trust. This trust ensures that your assets may only be passed to direct bloodline. For example, your kids, not your bloody spouse, your bloody ex. The beneficiary in this trust doesn't receive the asset outright, rather the trust holds their entitlement. A spouse or friend is unable to access any assets in the trust. But either way, you gotta have that hard conversation with your spouse, your potential lover at the moment, that hey, in times that we do get a divorce and separation, it's either we do the prenup or we do the bloodline trust. But if you don't want to do it, then you just roll the dice, love follows, romance in the air, and if we do get a divorce, well then half that shit. And also means you get half of my parents' cash. Jump in the comments and let me know what you would choose, a prenup or a trust, or trust in love, and just go with the flow.